Oh man, where to begin? Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Kryptonians out there, yesterday, July 8th, I got to see Superman in London, and so after all of this time covering the movie, which feels like it flew by, here we are with my no spoilers and first impressions of the movie. And I'm gonna try and be as comprehensive, honest, and level-headed as I can possibly be about my take here, getting into what I liked, what I loved, what I felt did well, and some parts that perhaps did not. And I want to stress to those of you who are sensitive about any kind of little inkling of a spoiler, even in a no-spoiler review, don't worry, this won't ruin anything, as we're just getting into the whole, okay, I've seen it, so what the heck do I think? So first of all, going into Superman, obviously having covered it on the channel alongside other DC Studios projects for the past couple of years, and not to mention Superman being a character that I really, really enjoy. Yes, it is safe to say that, surprise, surprise, I was wanting this movie to be something that I would really enjoy and for the DCU to have a good start. And to be transparent here, along the way, going as far back as the casting to the filming and then, of course, the marketing, I have liked a lot of what I've seen leading up to this movie's release. But no, despite what some may think, none of that guarantees that I'd like the movie. And while no movie or anything for that matter in life is infallible, and yes, we'll get into some of my criticisms, I am very happy to say that when the credits rolled for James Gunn's Superman, the first words that genuinely came to my mind was, wow, like, what a blast that was. For Superman, I don't think it ever needed to be this completely perfect, flawless peak of all comic book movies to a box office that has never been seen before in all of comic book media, nor do I think putting the heavy weight of those pressures on this film would serve anyone going into it. All I wanted was a pretty damn good start for the DCU through telling a good Superman story, one that can do that while also being able to simultaneously, successfully implement the sense of an already lived-in DC universe, which, to be honest, is no small feat to pull off. But I really feel like Gunn most certainly achieved those two things, with this, after all, being the proper live-action launching point for the DCU, which will have a whole variety of different projects to come. So first of all, to start off with what I really like about James Gunn's Superman is that it is absolutely an iteration of Superman that has many great qualities to it that a Superman fan can really, really enjoy. I would say that it is first and foremost a comic book film that absolutely boasts a blockbuster that roots itself in just the spirit of Superman from the comics, and I want to stress that here, to me, that is undeniable. We're going to get into the other casts later, of course, but, first, David Corenswet is, as one would hope, of course, with the Superman movie, easily the best thing about it. He brings to life a Clark Kent and Superman that has a ton of personality. He is instantly lovable as the character with his heart-led determination, which mirrors the comic book counterpart, and the plot provides what I'd say is a compelling journey that highlights the moral compass of Superman in a way that isn't boring as some people can view the character, but rather earnest and endearing. So this is without a doubt a great portrayal and iteration of Superman that I absolutely, after seeing the film, walking out of it, need to see again on the cinema screen in the DCU, because he is just without a doubt Superman. Like, there is no doubt about that. I know I keep saying that, but seriously. Now, before I get too ahead of myself, as for the plot, James Gunn, as we've covered on the channel in the past couple of years, covering many of his quotes as co-CEO of DC Studios, has extensively discussed what he has assessed audiences have grown tired of in the comic book space, with it not being so much of this superhero fatigue situation, but rather spectacle fatigue. Getting into how many movies out there don't always have characters or emotion at the focus, and in some cases, even setting that aside to opt in for a gigantic budget of spectacle, which yields in a sense of repetition, of leaving the movie theater and not having the experience necessarily stay with you despite the money that was poured into it. Which of course can result in audiences not connecting with the movie or its franchise as intended, but rather just absorbing a bit of an entertaining spectacle without stakes that feel like they matter. And of course, if you do that enough within a certain genre, yeah, it will kill interest over time. Now, with that being said, with everything Superman has to throw at you, James Gunn certainly stuck to his ideology there, and all while the film does have a lot going on in it, it absolutely prioritized this clear, emotional, and satisfying through line for Superman's journey that visits him 3 years into his Superman career. Obviously, without spoilers here, don't worry, what I can say is that we get to see him get to a point in where he's contemplating his place as Superman in the world, and his identity surrounding his human upbringing and his Kryptonian heritage. Now, some of this is just part of the course, as being Superman for 3 years and getting involved in larger conflicts due to Superman's very nature, such as the geopolitical situation between Baravia and Jahanpur, naturally just invites political ramifications that Superman may not always think through the consequences of at first. But then, as the plot unfolds, there's larger things that come into play, and all of this breeds a compelling internal struggle that's weaved throughout the plot. Of course, ignited by Lex Luthor trying to bring him down and smear his name in any way he can. And I mean anyway, Lex has it covered. But most importantly, back to my point, it isn't set aside nor abandoned in favor of pouring everything into one of those aforementioned spectacle gorges. James Gunn knows that it's crucial to have you as an audience member invested emotionally in David Corenswet's Superman and his journey, and to feel emotionally connected and invested in David Corenswet's Clark Kent, it really did feel effortless to me. But as I said, Superman in its entirety has a lot that it throws at you throughout its runtime of 1 hour and 58 minutes without the credits. And I believe that this is truly both a strength of the movie and one of its drawbacks. But admittedly here, for me, it's a bit of a muddled feeling, because with the structure of the film and those events that you see unfold, it's not actually this inherent bad thing, because there's a ton of things to appreciate with how chaotic things get for Corenswet's Man of Steel, and just how unapologetically comic booky all of that is, which, you know, goes to serve the overarching story at play. So all while that's pretty damn entertaining, it can feel like the pacing at times gets rapid, leaving me thinking that it could have perhaps done with some additional runtime to just sit in other scenes for longer to even that out, or even that aside, like factor in other parts of the movie, such as some of the other characters that we didn't get to spend as much time with. I don't necessarily agree with how some may say that Superman is overstuffed, but rather a way I describe it would be like picking up a comic book run, like mid-run. So Superman might be like, you know, the equivalent of starting with issues 12 to 18, where there's this big plot that is being played out on the pages. And that's also a cool thing, as we've discussed, because this movie literally does feel like you're opening a comic book issue, and before you know it, you're propelled into this story and world of the DCU. Now, don't get me wrong, the movie does take the opportunity for Superman to have these pensive moments, such as scenes between Superman and the Justice Gang, Lois and Clark, of course, and the Smallville Kent Farm scenes, which were fantastic and just highlight the level of care that has truly been taken to showcase Superman, Clark Kent, but Superman's relationship, you know, with his adoptive parents, ripped straight out of the comics that, you know, just doesn't fail to make things tear-jerkingly emotional. It's moments like that where you really do feel like Gunn understands these characters. It just feels like a few more moments of this would have helped even things out in what is a simple plot, yet one that can feel flush with beat-to-beat moments. Also, just on the side note here, we also heard that in one of the cuts of the movie that was being test screened, there were apparently these cuts to title cards for days of the week. Now, after seeing the movie, the concept of that really makes sense to me, and all while it wouldn't have transformed the movie or anything, to me, it just kind of feels like it would have worked really well to break up the events that unfold in the film. And it just feels like it would have been beneficial when also in spirit of the comic book vibes that Gunn was going for. And I'd love to see if any of you have seen that, if you also agree with that as well. So overall, at the core of what James Gunn was striving for with this Superman story, I was happy. As far as the writing goes, there's some nitpicks that I have that I can get into in a spoiler breakdown, to some larger things that surround a part of the plot which connects to its resolution in such a way where it was a bit too convenient for my liking. And what I mean by that is, and again, with no spoilers, so this might not make sense as it's going to be fairly vague, but there's an important aspect tied to the plot's resolution, which is all predicated off of a couple of characters and their connection and just the overall convenience that link even being a thing in the first place, which leads to that one character being able to utilize what they can with the position they're in. I know that's speaking really ambiguously, but if you've seen the movie already, you may know which two characters I'm referring to. And again, what that comes down to is just the whole, oh, well, that seems a bit convenient, slash contrived for plot reasons, so to speak. But even with that being a criticism for me, it didn't weigh down or anchor down the film in a huge or fundamental way in reflection here, because, yeah, there's just lots to appreciate with Gunn's Superman, with the sum of all of its parts that make things just easier to look past for me. But it is still a critique nonetheless. Now, as for the rest of the supporting cast in the movie, I think Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane was absolutely fantastic. You guys know me. I've been a fan of these castings since day one. Her chemistry with David Corenswet was brilliant. They're fantastic as Lois Lane and Clark Kent, and just Lois Lane and Superman. I really enjoyed all of her scenes, to be honest, whether it was just with her and Clark in the Daily Planet or that interview scene that we've had previews for a long time, to, yes, those scenes between Superman and Lois. I've also always found it just such an interesting choice to see them 3-ish months into their relationship and to just see how that contributes to the romance subplot of this film, because it's obviously not exactly an origin of their relationship as they're already together, yet they haven't been together for years, so they're in this fascinating place where they don't quite know what they are right now. One thing I will say is that with everything that's going on in this movie, it did feel that after such an interesting setup with their romance subplot in the film, it kind of felt like it was leaned less and less upon as the film fleshed out more and more. It's not that it isn't still a plot thread that's maintained with her feelings for Clark being contemplated and, growing more and more, but rather it just kind of feels like it's placed a bit on the back burner as other things just explode in the film. But it was still something that was great to watch whenever they were together. Like, honestly, don't doubt that for a single second. Now, Nicholas Hoult, guys, honestly, he is just incredible as Lex Luthor. Again, here, it's no surprise that I'm quite a fan of the castings in this movie, but you can really tell when you watch Nicholas Hoult in the scenes that he has, you can see that he gave every single ounce of performance that he could possibly give, and he really nailed it. So it goes without saying that he's a brilliant standout. Like, clearly, he's perfectly diabolical with a hate for Superman that sears through the screen. The way the character was written, and all of these characters, in fact, it really just, again, does go to show that James Gunn certainly understands these characters on that fundamental comic book level. Say what you will about this or that with the film, but the characterizations of all of them are done extremely well. Lex's conviction with what he wants to do with taking down Superman is an obsession that just drives him on screen to a point in where just Nicholas Hoult gives a performance that just gets more progressively unhinged and sadistic. It makes you love to hate him. And I was, again, always supportive of this casting, but it actually exceeded my expectations here. Now, as for the Justice Gang, man, they were awesome. I know a lot of people feel like, oh man, overstuffed movie with too many characters, but honestly, it didn't feel that way to me. Now, we can have that conversation on another level with the amount of things that are thrown at you within the plot itself, but the Justice Gang characters are what James Gunn said they were, and how he explained if he was gonna try and properly tell Superman's story in the DCU with this first entry in a world that's an already living, breathing DC universe, there are two sides to Clark's life, especially 3 years in to him being Superman on the scene in Metropolis. So that would be Clark Kent and those in the Daily Planet that he interacts with, such as Lois, Jimmy, Perry, Cat Grant, Ron Troop, and others. But as Superman, he does indeed have his metahuman compatriots. And so their screen time in the movie, for me, was appropriate and not overbearing in the slightest. To start with Guy Gardner here, I will say what I said at the beginning of when he was cast, in that Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner is bloody fantastic. I mean, I don't see how anyone could dispute Nathan Fillion's casting as Guy Gardner after seeing this movie, because he just embodies the character so well. His personality is literally on point, and I found him very entertaining, and the use of his Green Lantern powers in the film were fantastic. Say what you will about the Lord Tech suits, I can understand how some people may not like them, but if you know the character of Guy Gardner, I just don't feel like you can tell me after seeing Superman for yourself that Fillion doesn't do him justice. I'd be pretty hard-pressed to believe that the general audience wouldn't rock with Guy Gardner in Superman. But I think the standout character in the Justice Gang for me was Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific. He was so good to the point in where out of all of the other characters in the movie, other than Superman himself, I kind of was left demanding to see more of him. I would say that Mr. Terrific easily gets more screen time than the other members, just in terms of the plot itself and what he gets involved in. But Eddie Gathegi just brings this character to life. He has some great lines. The uses of his T-spheres are just fantastic, and one of the best action scenes in the entire movie, in a very Guardians of the Galaxy spirited way, is him kicking ass with those T-spheres without even breaking a sweat. Again, as soon as you see him, you'll likely be hoping that Gunn's next mystery project that he's working on is one that involves him in some way, shape, or form. As for Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl, I enjoyed her character as well, but the thing is, while she had some cool moments, especially in the kaiju fight among some others, some funny moments, and she worked well with the other characters, and I enjoyed her interactions with the other Justice Gang members, I would easily say that she is the least utilized in the movie, so I look forward to seeing more of her in the future of the DCU. Even though she's going to be in Peacemaker Season 2, I don't really expect to see much of her there beyond that recruiting scene we saw in the trailer. So again, I just look forward to seeing more of her one day, as I don't doubt that we will. It's just a matter of when. But from what we do see of her, I don't really have any complaints other than it just, again, if this runtime was a bit longer, maybe they could have incorporated just a bit more of Hawkgirl. And then, of course, there is Lex Luthor's henchman, the Engineer and Ultraman. Maria Gabriela de Faria was really badass, and the way they utilized the character was really, really cool, especially with the comic book accurate nanotech and the various scenes of her using her powers and how they incorporated them. And honestly, she is pretty damn formidable, even to Superman. The only thing I'd say here is, kind of in a similar way to Hawkgirl, is that you don't really get too much into her character or her motivations. They're definitely mentioned, but there isn't really much delved into there, given everything else the movie has to do. So you're kind of left wanting to see more about what put this character in this position. But then again, this also serves as a launching point for her character. So there is a potential there for her future in the DCU, as after all, James Gunn did announce The Authority as a project project in the DCU, which is a team that she's a part of. The only thing being that we don't really have any significant updates on that, to the point of where a lot of us are wondering if the Authority is even going to happen. And I think that'd be a shame if it didn't happen, but I do think Gunn will be using the Engineer again. Now, Ultraman is a tough one to get into for obvious reasons. The way I describe him is, as Gunn has publicly said, he really is just Lex Luthor's muscle, and I guess you could say Luthor's own avatar and remote control, so to speak, in order to bash in Superman's skull, since he can't really do that himself. I never expected profound things with Ultraman in the movie, given that the main villain of the film is Luthor. That's important to remember. So I will say, don't get any expectations up for some kind of profound, crazy stuff when it comes to Ultraman. But the way Ultraman is used is still very entertaining, and paired with the Engineer, my god, do they make things tough for Superman, to the point of where Superman hasn't really ever faced a threat like this before, which pretty much becomes his match. Now, as for Eve Teschmacher, she's an interesting one. I was kind of concerned that I wouldn't enjoy her character all that much with just all the marketing that showed her taking selfies every 2 seconds. With my concerns there, I was just worried about this kind of over-reliance of comic relief in the film. And all I mean by that is I just honestly didn't know if it would work for me, or if I just kind of find it to be the kind of humor that's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. But I will say that Sarah Sampaio, sorry, I butcher freaking names. I do learn them, but then sometimes I forget them. She provided moments to the film that were genuinely funny. Like, I don't feel like they bashed you over the head with it, as what I was a little bit apprehensive about. And it does work in true Gunn fashion. I think my only issues with this character in the script is that, without getting into it much, the way she's used serves as a bit of a plot device that felt a bit too manufactured to just drive the plot into certain places, let's say, that ultimately felt like a narrative convenience. But again, I can't really get into that so much, but I'm sure if you've seen it, you can perhaps understand where I'm coming from there. Now, Anthony Carrigan as Metamorpho, hell yeah. Like, this character, as you can tell from the trailers, is in quite a predicament in Lex's pocket dimension. And then you also have baby Joey as well. I mean, I can't really get into any of this much without getting into spoilers, but let's just say that I thought all while his character was a bit of a plot device to begin with, his journey transforms into something that really makes me interested in the future of this character. Like, I am eager to learn more about this iteration as well, because somewhat similar to Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl, there's not like a huge deep dive into this version of the character's life beyond, you know, a couple of things. The usage of his powers, though, was awesome, and there's definitely more to see from him beyond what was teased in the trailers. Now, as for Krypto, you know what? I was slightly apprehensive that Krypto would be leaned on too much in the movie, given just how much he's been a part of the marketing. And it's not that I didn't like what I saw of Krypto in the marketing, but I wasn't sure it would have been a great idea to use him like a whole bunch, or just kind of like overutilize the cute dog kind of thing. But I was very happy with how Krypto was used in the film. He is both certainly a good dog, but also a very troublesome one, with a shining personality that lends to the humor of the film that didn't feel like it was overdone. Krypto as a character just overall, of course, lends to the true ownership over this fantastical DCU that we're getting, and he is absolutely a strength of the movie that I think audiences will really enjoy. Now, having mentioned humor there, getting into that and just other aspects of the tone, I've of course at this point, by the time I'm uploading this, seen a couple of reviews that have already gone up saying that the humor can be too silly, and honestly, I think this is just going to be completely subjective for people, as kind of humor is, but to be honest, I think a lot of it will absolutely work for general movie goers. A lot of the laughs in this film did feel genuine to me. Like, not every single one of them lands, but if you're familiar with Gunn's beats, they're obviously massively scaled back from something like Peacemaker, but are more akin to beats that you would experience from a Guardians film. I don't have an issue with it, and the levity brought to the scenes, whether that be moments with Clark or Superman, they really did blend in naturally a lot of the times, which just fit with this overall tone Gunn is going for here, with this Silver Age Superman lens. But that absolutely doesn't mean that there aren't serious moments either. Like, just like in Guardians of the Galaxy, sure, it can be goofy, it can be this, it can be that, but there are moments that will emotionally affect you and be serious and dramatic and tear-jerking. And that is something I also really felt like, well, I wanted out of this movie, but I felt was important to do in this movie, because, you know, you can't just go all in on one side of the tone. Now, I fully understood going in that this would have goofy aspects to it, light-hearted moments, but I also wanted to see a Superman movie that recognizes when it needs to change the temperature and get a little bit serious and just feel that in the tone. And there's absolutely moments like that. So much so that there's this one scene between Lex, Superman, and another character who won't be named that was just heartbreaking, and it was honestly, in retrospect, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, because seeing Superman react to that situation and just knowing what he values above anything else, like, man, you guys will know what I'm talking about when you see it. That scene was just great, and it conveys how Gunn has a really good talent in making a movie both lighthearted when he wants to, but very emotional when it needs to be as well. And that goes into what we were discussing earlier with the important things that you need to take into account to avoid just a straight up repetitious, spectacle fatigue kind of movie. I have to say as well, of course, I think James Gunn did a good job at directing this film. You can tell that it was thoroughly planned out and his vision was executed to a T. As many of us know, James Gunn storyboards all of his stuff down to the last shot, and so everything felt very precise, very much so bringing his vision to life with the various approaches to scenes, to the action scenes and the cinematography. There's also a very, very distinct personality to all of it that, once again, as you've probably heard 1,000 people say by this point, reflects a comic book on screen, which I realize sounds like an overused statement, a cheesy one, but it's nonetheless a very true one to describe this movie. It just really rings true here, and it's one of the stylistic choices that will give James Gunn's Superman and just overall DC Universe a unique place in the space, with just how he took care to realize that. Like, the colors pop, the soundtrack is utilized really well and elevates scenes to just another level. It cements its own visual identity, and the movie lives and breathes a fantastical DCU that I personally felt very satisfied with. That being said, this may not be to everyone's tastes, as we've covered a lot on the channel before, and it's going to be interesting to just see how this resonates with audiences who may question the unapologetic embracing of this comic book tone. But to me, like, all in all, I think by now you'd already know at this point from the marketing of the movie if that approach to this iteration is up your street or not. So for the most part, I was very pleased with the way things looked. Don't get me wrong, there were a couple of shots or so in the movie that felt janky at times, but like, overall, the way they captured Superman's movement to the larger spectacle scenes that you've seen featured in the trailers, which provide well thought out camera movements, it all showcases really creative dynamics with the way characters are utilized in Gunn's style. Moments that come to mind are absolutely the kaiju fight, Superman's flying, Superman's action, Superman's bloody powers, or a really, as I mentioned earlier, a really awesome fight scene with Mr. Terrific. Like, you will know it when you see it. Now, the movie also has some great surprises in there. Again, don't worry, I'm not going to give anything away, but I, of course, had to touch on the subject. Now, Gunn said that this is the most Easter egg-laden movie he's ever made, and I would say that is true, to the point of where I wish I had a copy already so I could inspect every corner of a scene to look at what I felt I just touched on in the screening, but just disappeared before I knew it. A good example of this would be what James Gunn publicly spoke about recently recently, and how there's this huge mural that details the history of metahumans in the DCU. Now, after seeing the film, I completely understand why he mentioned that he's looking forward to posting the image of the mural to the public, because by the time you try and identify stuff with it in the scene that it's in, it's kind of gone. However, I did manage to spot a couple of characters in it that made me very happy, because it kind of lends to the overall world building of the DCU with relation to how this is a mural of the metahuman history in the DCU. And that's all I can really say for now. There's also another certain surprise, but not necessarily a surprise for some, at the end of the movie, which made me also very, very happy to see. Again, that's all I can say. As for the overall ending, like, man, I feel like with the overall story said and done, they did a great job tying a nice ribbon on things at the end with just the culmination of Superman's arc in the film. That specific scene I'm referring to that goes directly into the credits, Gunn knew exactly what he was doing, as it is pretty hard to not smile ear to ear the entire time that scene is playing out. Now, as for the post-credits, they were just a couple of fun bonus things, nothing to demand you staying in your seat if you have to go and head back for a certain time or whatever. That's not me trying to put them down. All I'm saying is that there's nothing hugely important that's teased or set up in the post-credit scenes, which I'm fine with, and Gunn has already spoken publicly about how he feels about doing that anyway. If you have a great time with the movie, I guess I'd recommend staying just for a couple of extra bits, because hey, why not? But it is certainly not required. Now, overall, guys, as I said, like I had an absolute blast with Superman. After all is said and done, with this long, rambly, no spoilers review, I think it is, like, truly a solid start for the DCU. And I think that's all it really needed to achieve. Something that felt like a blast to start this universe off with. It provides superb comic book spectacle, romance, and endearing levity, while faithfully bringing to life the earnest spirit and humanity of the character. While, as I mentioned at the start, like, it's not infallible, it's not flawless, because what bloody movie is, this is an iteration of Superman that I feel many in the audience have been waiting to see for decades, with Gunn nailing what was most important, and that is Superman himself. To me, David Corenswet borderline feels quintessentially Clark Kent and Superman, and Nicholas Hoult just gives his all to the role of this iconic villain. The whole cast is pretty spectacular, and I know I haven't got into everyone, such as, you know, more on the Daily Planet side of things, but they all play their parts really well. The characters just inject life into this already living and breathing DC universe that for sure left me wanting to see more in those future projects to come. And I truly do feel that this is a movie that will be liked by the general movie-going audience, for those that do go to see it. And that's the fascinating thing to me. I do think that the general audience will love it, but it's another thing getting people to go and buy tickets in the first place to even find out for themselves, you know? As for the just overall end of this video, I will, of course, be doing a spoiler talk, possibly even a spoiler-tagged live stream soon in the coming days. But right now, guys, it's like July 9th, so I don't feel like an absolutely humongous rush to, you know, get to the scene-by-scene breakdown of things or subsequent videos that could end up in discussion series, Q&A stuff about what you guys want to pick my brain about. All of that will be happening, so leave some comments as well where I can screenshot some stuff. But, you know, I'm going to wait, not like an enormous amount of time, but, you know, not everyone would have seen the movie at this point. So just know that more content is, of course, coming. But with that being said and done, there is my review, my no spoilers review, but overall, like, you know, review, my vibe for James Gunn's Superman. So let me know your thoughts on what I had to say down in the comments below. If you have seen the movie already, whether that's at an early screening, a preview screening, a Fandango screening, I would love to hear your thoughts. But please do use spoiler tags. Don't spoil it for other people down in the comments. I'd really appreciate a like on this video. If you're brand new here and you're still watching right now, I highly recommend subscribing to the channel. Of course, I recommend it because, you know, we're going to have a lot of DCU stuff to cover in the future. If you liked Superman, you know, there's a lot of projects projects to come. Peacemaker Season 2, Lanterns, Supergirl, and much, much more. But until then, I'm going to love you and leave you, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.